The Chihuahuan Desert spans over the southern part of Arizona and into New Mexico, sprawling down to the west of Texas and crossing straight over the border into northern Mexico. The desert can reach over 100 degrees Fahrenheit during the day at peak hours. But at night, I don't think many people know that the desert can become extremely cold, often reaching temperatures below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. You do not want to be caught out in the Chihuahuan Desert at all, especially during the night, much less alone with no one around, because no one will hear you scream, and you are left to fight against the elements, from the freezing temperatures to the extreme heat during the day to even the deadly creatures that call the desert home, such as rattlesnakes, coyotes, and scorpions. If you don't make it out alive there, your body will decompose at a faster rate due to the high heat with no shade, direct sunlight onto a corpse. Once you get lost out there, finding you is virtually impossible. But what if your killers would do anything to pin your death on each other? Once best friends turn foe, who will do anything to not be arrested, including betraying each other, burning evidence, and hiding clothing in carpet. The downfall is a simple mind game, and even simpler minds who just can't keep their stories straight. Hey, I'm Serenity and this is my channel, and today we're joined here by Ginger. Clover's up there in the pillows. I don't know if you can see him. And welcome back to another Hometown Horrors. Today we are discussing a case that I don't want to say it's similar. I always see it lumped together with the Katie Setpitch case, the NMSU grad student who went missing and was found in the desert. This case has a lot of similar elements to that one, especially since both girls were found in the desert and both attended NMSU. So that video is already on my channel if you want to check it out. It's a really long case, but Katie's story helped change US law forever, and I think it is such an important thing to know. Today we are going to be talking about Carly Martinez, who was a freshman college student who went missing right before the start of spring semester. Before we begin, I do want to give trigger warnings for the following: murder, rape, and mentions of stab wounds. If any of these topics you believe you'd be unable to handle, please stop watching, put yourself first, and I'll see you at a later date with a different video. If I get any information wrong, please kindly let me know down below. I try to get the following information as accurately as possible, but some websites said some things and others said others, so I just went with the commonly most reported detail of that aspect. I used only respected sources, and usually I only use local news coverings, so all my sources are linked down below. Check them out. Lastly, this video is an informational research study that I am sharing for academic entertainment reasons only. I mean absolutely no harm to anyone mentioned, especially the victim and the victim's family. So get comfy, grab a blanket, grab a snack, grab a drink, and let's begin. Las Cruces, New Mexico is a college town. It's just north of Texas, home to the best university, I would say, in New Mexico State University, aka NMSU. It's situated between the Rio Grande River and the Chihuahuan Desert, and it is the backdrop of where this case takes place. It was January 15th, 1998, when the local precinct of the student campus officers got a call about an 18-year-old student, college freshman named Carly Martinez, who had gone missing. She kind of just disappeared overnight. Carly was going into her second semester at NMSU. She had just returned from winter break. It's January 15th. The semester is about to start, and she was going to start her second semester of college. She came back to her dorm to start prepping, to get ready, to get her books together, all of that. Carly had spent the winter holidays with her family down in El Paso, Texas. Not much information is known about Carly's life, especially since this case is over 25 years old. But from what I know, Carly attended all of her public school years in El Paso. She graduated from an El Paso high school in the summer of 1997 before starting college in the fall of 1997 at NMSU. So campus police responded to this 911 call and arrived shortly to Carly's dorm room, where her roommates and parents were, waiting to talk to the police officers. Carlos Martinez, Carly's father, told officers how unlikely it was that his daughter would just disappear and not keep in constant contact with her family. I said this in the Katie Setpitch case, and I'll say it again in this case. Carly's roommate noticed right away that Carly was not there the next morning, and she called the parents immediately to say, "Carly's not here. I saw her last night and now she's not here." And together they both decided to call the police. Noticing so quickly that your roommate is not there, I don't think would happen necessarily today, because because we all have our phones, and yeah, I may not see my friends every day. I can call them, and if they don't answer, I'm like, okay, whatever. But this swift action of noticing Carly hasn't even been gone for more than 24 hours. We don't know where she's at. She's not picking up the phone. We need to get the police involved immediately. This swift action helped so much in both cases, and it got the ball rolling on Carly's case to try and find her. Carlos Martinez, Carly's father, told police that just the night before, on January 14th, 1998, both of Carly's parents had driven her and her sister, who was also attending NMSU, back up to NMSU to their dorms, their respective dorms, and had taken them to dinner. Kind of like a good luck on your next semester. Then they dropped them off at each of their dorms at around 6:30 p.m. Police wasted no time in opening an missing persons investigation, and they started by interviewing Carly's parents and her roommate to get a physical description of Carly along with photographs. Carly had long dark hair and dark eyes. She stood about 5'6" in height. When her parents last saw her, they told police she was wearing jeans and a brown jacket. The family immediately got to work on their own. They started posting missing persons flyers all around campus, hoping that someone may have just seen Carly the night before and maybe she's lost somewhere in the city, and that would be able to help them find her. Police didn't wait either. They got to work too, and they conducted a massive search with officers and volunteers on horseback. They went through the city's desert because a lot of college kids like to go out to the desert to drink and stuff, but like I said, it's very easy to get lost there. The same happens here in El Paso, my hometown, which is an hour from Las Cruces. People get lost in the desert all the time. So they brought in police dogs immediately, and they used a piece of Carly's clothing given to them by her parents and roommate, hoping that the scent on the clothing would help be able to track Carly down, hoping that she just got lost. Somehow she ended up in the desert and she's lost. But there was no sign of Carly anywhere. So within the city limits, no one could find her, and they thought, okay, we're checking the desert now. It wouldn't be the first time that something like this happened, and they were really worried because if she did get lost in the desert, like I keep saying, she wouldn't have a long time to survive out there. There's no water anywhere nearby. The sun is hot, you'll get dehydrated quickly, and it's easy to get stranded in the middle of there. There's no way to really track where you are on foot. However, nothing came of these searches. No clue, nothing. 4 days later, on January 19th, 1998, the first true break in the case came through another NMSU student named Samuel Sanchez. He told police officers that he saw the missing posters around campus, and he wanted to inform them that he had seen Carly the night of the 14th at one of the off-campus bookstores, probably getting her books ready for the next semester, with one of his co-workers named Jesse Avalos. Then later that evening, he also saw them, the pair, Jesse and Carly, at a local roller skating rink. Jesse and Carly were seen rolling around the rink, holding hands and laughing. It looked like a good time to Samuel. Samuel also witnessed the pair be joined by who he knew as one of Jesse's friends, Jason Desnoyers. The trio looked to be having a good time. It was a little odd to Samuel that a friend would join what seemed to be a date, and this was the first real sighting that anyone had of Carly after her parents had dropped her off at her dorm. So campus police knew it was time to call in the big guns because this looked a lot more suspicious than just a college student somehow getting lost. It called in the Las Cruces Police Department to help assist them. David Cortez was the lead investigator on this case from the LCPD, and he immediately interviewed Samuel, asking everything that he could get the details on. Samuel Sanchez remembers that the rink closed a little earlier that night, and he saw the trio, Jesse, Carly, and Jason, leave together. Campus police decided it was time to speak to Jesse Avalos, asking him to provide answers on his whereabouts on the night of January 14th, 1998, to confirm if he was actually hanging out with Carly, to make sure that this witness sighting was correct, and if he had a date with Carly that night, and if his friend Jason Desnoyers decided to join them. Now, Jesse wasn't difficult to crack. He told police straight away that that night he was on a date with Carly. His friend Jason decided to join them, and after skating, they decided to go to a local bar to drink a couple beers. Jesse then told police after the bar, he dropped Carly off at a gas station near campus so she could use a payphone, something she asked him to do, and he hadn't seen her since. Now there's three things. Carly was 18. Yes, Las Cruces is a college town. Yes, a bunch of students underage drink, but still, if they were drinking in a bar, these two men were giving her drinks while she was underage. Second, if you're on a date, why is your friend joining? It seems to me some sort of nefarious intent. You're on a date. From what I can tell from research, this wasn't a relationship that many people around Carly knew about. So it's not just like, we've been together 3, 4, 5 years, our mutual friend is coming to join us. To me, that seems more normal than this is a fresh relationship and your friend is just coming along. And third, under what circumstances would would you ever drop your date off at a gas station without seeing them being picked up by a reliable ride? I understand not being dropped off at your home for safety reasons, but a gas station, which has this aura around it of being a dangerous place, especially at night, that doesn't add up. And Detective Cortez had the exact same thoughts as me. He asked, why would Carly use a gas station payphone and not one that is on campus or in her dorm area? He knew something just wasn't adding up. So Cortez knew he needed to now go speak to Jason Desnoyers, Jesse's friend, who joined them the night of the 14th. Jason's story started very similar to Jesse's. He claimed Jesse went on a date with Carly and he met up with them at the local skating rink. Jason also claimed that Carly and Jesse were together, but this is where their stories seem to differ. After the drinks the trio shared, Jason claimed that they dropped Carly off at her dorm. Detective Cortez knew he had caught the pair in a lie. Someone's story of what happened to Carly after the roller rink and the bar wasn't right, and maybe they both were lying. They had conflicting stories, which caused Detective Cortez to worry even more, because up to this point, everyone is under the assumption that Carly is missing, but now with these stories that are not adding up, he's worried if Carly is even still alive. Detective Cortez asked permission to search through Jason Desnoyers' truck, thinking he might find something in there that could help locate Carly. They are still operating as this is a missing persons case. The police who did the search, there was a warrant, and then Jason had to consent to it. The police noticed that there were scratch marks outside of the truck on both sides all the way down from the passenger and driver's side, extending the length of the vehicle. Now, these are not scratches that may occur from a stray cat jumping on your hood. It happens. They're not those scratches. These are distinct scratches, and they're on both sides of the truck. Besides that really odd detail, the car seemed to be spotless until police realized it was a little too clean, as if the truck had been washed multiple times inside and out. It was so clean that to them it looked like they just got this car off the lot. It was brand new, no miles sort of thing. Not a car that is used day in and day out. Yes, you can be clean with your car, but this car looked like no one had ever driven it before. So detectives decided to collect a couple fiber samples from inside the car, from the floor and the seat, to see if anything sort of came up. Then they used chemical luminol to check the car for blood or any sort of bodily fluids that might be present in the car that wouldn't be visible to our naked eye, because again, this car was clean. Under the glowing light of the luminol substance, the center console, the center bench in the truck, in trucks, specifically more trucks in the 90s, they had one bench and then you can usually fit 3 people. The center of that bench where a middle person would sit was lit up by the luminol, and it showed a large reddish brown spot on it. So they decided to cut this portion out of the bench and to cut some of the floor from this area out of the truck to send it to the lab to test for human blood. This was sent to the New Mexico State Crime Lab, and this fabric came back positive for human blood. However, since the truck was so clean, whatever was used to clean it so this red stain wouldn't show up to the naked eye caused it to destroy any sort of DNA evidence that they could have gotten from. So the hunt had to continue to find Carly Martinez. They knew that they had some sort of blood DNA in one of the last 2 men seen with her, but they still couldn't locate her. So they gathered any and all evidence that might help them find her, and her disappearance was reported all over New Mexico to Arizona and to the upper part of Texas. Authorities hoped this constant coverage would help another witness come forward who may have seen Carly with these men or may have seen her after the bar, seen where she was dropped off, anything like that. Some leads came in, but it all really led nowhere, except one lead came in from an informant who had been arrested recently on a parole violation. The man was a neighbor to one of the suspects in this case, Jesse Avalos. This informant claimed to have information regarding a jacket he saw Jesse wearing the night of the 14th, the night Carly was last seen. He claims that a few days after the 14th, Jesse's bestie, his best friend, Jason Desnoyers, approached this neighbor asking him for a favor. Now, the neighbor obviously knew who this man was. He's seen him with Jesse all the time. And the favor was to take this jacket from Jason and to hide it somewhere. It was a really odd request, but the neighbor did it. He said he hid the jacket under some rolled pieces of carpet outside of the apartment building, kind of near like the dump area, the dumpsters. And by some miracle, police were able to go to the apartment and find this rolled up piece of carpet, unroll it, and locate the jacket that this informant mentioned. This jacket was a military style jacket with what was assumed to be like blood stains on it and a couple of other odd stains on this jacket that are not like food related. So the jacket was collected as evidence and sent to the state crime lab to be tested. Police knew these odd little findings were adding up, and it was time to get a warrant to search Jesse Avalos' apartment. They searched every single room top to bottom in that apartment, and in the bathroom they noticed even more brownish colored stains that looked to be blood. So these stains were on the shower curtain, so they gathered that, they bagged it up as evidence to send to the crime lab, and as they were searching through the apartment, they also noticed a long brown hair in Jesse's bed, so they collected the hair and the sheets to test for evidence to see if it was Carly. A bunch of Avalos' clothing was also collected and sent to the New Mexico Forensic Lab for testing. Investigators knew that if the smudges that they had found, which were on the jacket and the shower curtain, were blood, they could then compare it to see if it was Carly's DNA to confirm if this blood was hers. Detective Cortez had asked the Martinez family for some sort of personal item of Carly's that may have her DNA, such as her hairbrush, her toothbrush, anything like that, so that they knew that if the evidence they collected was positive for DNA, they could test it to Carly's, and now they had what they needed. Investigators, they were really running on very minimal leads to find Carly, and the days kept passing. January had come and gone, and they realized that Carly was probably no longer alive, especially with the evidence that they kept finding. The detectives called both Jason and Jesse down to the station with warrants to collect their DNA samples from them to test. Jesse showed up with a lawyer actually. As his hair, blood, and saliva samples were taken, this lawyer was watching over. Detective Cortez supervised both men's DNA samples being taken, trying to observe if either of them had any sort of signs on their body indicating that they had been in some sort of tussle recently. So keep in mind those scratches on the truck. Cortez was trying to make some sort of parallel to those scratches to one of the men, because from what he could think, whoever caused those scratches was fighting back. And while observing both men, he noticed that Jason had a long, deep scratch on his right hand, which seemed to be new because it was barely entering the scabbing over phase. It had to be recent because it hadn't scarred over. The scab didn't begin to peel yet, so this had to be a new injury. And it was large enough to not be some sort of scratch you accidentally get in daily life from daily activities like cooking, like cleaning, anything like that. However, Jason Dessner did have a lawyer with him, and the lawyer refused for this scratch to be documented or taken any pictures of. So next, Jesse Avalos came in to get his DNA, hair, and saliva sampled, and both men's samples were then sent to the New Mexico Crime Lab to be tested against the jacket, the shower curtain, and other evidence collected from Jesse's apartment. The DNA examinations extracted from Carly's personal items were compared to the DNA samples located on the jacket and shower curtain. The jacket and shower curtains tested positive for blood, but the DNA results were startling. They tested positive for two separate individuals, other than Carly. The DNA not only matched Carly, but it also matched Jason and Jesse's DNA. But the question remained, was Carly still alive? Did these men do something to Carly that caused her to bleed, but somehow she is still alive? They knew who was responsible for the disappearance, but did they end her life too? Police knew the only way to get to the bottom of this question was to ask Jason Dessner and Jesse Avalos. In the beginning, Jason was cooperating with the case, but now he had lawyered up, and his location could not be found. He disappeared the day after he gave those DNA samples. One of their suspects seemed to be on the run, but police wasted no time and moved immediately on to Jesse Avalos, hoping that they could kind of tip this case in their favor by playing it cool and still playing that they think Carly is just missing, and asking Jesse for his hand in helping solve the case, hoping that, well, this apparently is your girlfriend, wouldn't you want to find her? Detective Cortez decided to play the long game, pretending that this was still a missing persons investigation, that they're not even thinking that Carly is no longer alive, and that these two men are responsible. And Jesse was the last person to be seen with Carly, so wouldn't he want to help? The Martinezes were growing weary to find their daughter, and this tactic by Detective Cortez seemed to work. Jesse, while at the station, just blurts out, "Let's go for a ride. We should get in a car and go for a drive around the outer part of the city where the desert is. A place in the city that if someone were to go missing, or more importantly, someone decided to dump someone else's body there, there's a very low chance of them ever being found and for the person who committed the crime to ever be caught." Jesse Avalos directed Detective Cortez to drive to a very specific location in the Chihuahuan Desert, a location that you kind of have to be going there kind of regularly to know. And while they were in the desert, Jesse told Cortez to stop at a random point. He pointed out into the desert, claiming to a specific area that is where his best friend, Jason Dessner, burned specific items that would incriminate his best friend. Detective Cortez got out of the car and crept over to the area where he found ashes. And what was in these ashes was chilling. The remnants of clothing, accessories, metal clothing zippers, remains of eyeglasses, and a woman's used lipstick, along with a woman's compact case. And the one that really horrified Cortez was a set of keys. Car keys which do not burn, and another key which had a number engraved on it, a number to Carly's college dorm room. Detective Cortez knew that they had the evidence they needed to pin Carly's disappearance on Jesse Avalos and Jason Desnoyer. Jesse then told Detective Cortez that Jason had ended Carly's life, burning all of her personal items in the attempt to destroy evidence. And this was the very first statement that ties Jason to Carly as the one who ended her life. But Jesse claimed because it was so dark that night, he wouldn't be able to retrace the steps of where Carly could be found. So even though Jesse was claiming to pin Carly's death on his best friend Jason, by admitting that he witnessed this, he was a witness in the death. He may have not thought that by taking him to where the burning ashes are, that he would admit that I witnessed this happen, but he did. He pinned himself at least as a witness to the scene, but could have partaken in the murder. Without a body, Detective Cortez knew that they needed to pin down the exact location, or at least a general area where Carly's body could be located. They started by calling Carly's parents to ask them to come up to Las Cruces to identify the items found in the burnt ashes, the keys, and a couple more personal items, including earrings. The parents confirmed that these were their daughter's personal belongings, so they knew that Jesse was telling the truth. Another important call came though shortly after this. I know I'm kind of discussing this case like it happened within a couple weeks, but this case did take months. You know, in reality, DNA testing, especially sending DNA items to a state lab, takes months on end to get the results back, and at this point in the case, 2 months had passed. It was now March 17th, 1998, when Detective Cortez received a call from just outside of San Diego, California. It was from a deputy officer in that area in San Diego who's seen flyers posted at precincts in the area of Jesse Desnoyers, who they were looking for, a man who seemingly was on the run. His mugshot was posted up with being on a wanted poster. Then this officer had seen Jason Desnoyers in real life. So Jason was arrested on this fleeing warrant and transported back to Las Cruces, New Mexico, on suspicions of killing Carly Martinez, with the help of the FBI to transport him. Jason was now behind bars, and the next person they needed to arrest was Jesse Avalos on tampering with evidence. The pair were now set to go to trial, but prosecutors knew that it would be very difficult to get a conviction when they still couldn't locate Carly's body. So searches continued, because it wasn't just important to this case to locate Carly's body for the trial, but also for the Martinez family to be able to lay their loved one to rest. Police knew they needed to go back into the desert, so they organized extensive searches of most of the desert area. Mainly they were focusing around where those ashes were found. Hundreds of people aided in these searches, but the desert was so large that police knew this operation could take weeks to even months on end to find any little clue of where Carly could be. Investigators decided it was time to play a good old game of mind tricks. You see, Jason and Jesse were not very smart criminals. They weren't very bright. For the love of God, they revealed that they were involved in Carly's disappearance less than a week after she vanished, and then one of them decided to flee after giving his DNA. They tried to hide evidence, but neglected to hide one of the biggest pieces of evidence in their own homes, then brought in an outsider who was also a criminal, but an outsider from this case, to hide a jacket. The shower curtain, which can only be believed to have been when Jesse was trying to wash off blood off of him, had blood on it, and he didn't even notice. They were not smart criminals by any means necessary, and they broke when very little police pressure was put on them. Police decided they were going to play the oldest game in the book, turning the two of them against each other by convincing them that the other person had already confessed. It was just a matter of time before these very pathetic criminals decided to start talking. So police decided they were going to visit each of the men separately at different times in the prison. They started with Jesse, telling him that they found Jason because Jason was on the run in California, and as he was being extradited back to Las Cruces, he put the blame all on you, Jesse. Jesse right then and there folds over, freaks out, and tells detectives that he's gonna come clean. He will take them straight to where Carly's body is, And Detective Cortez tells him, this is your only chance. You have no chance after this. This is your one chance to help us locate her body. The police got together a very large search team to coordinate this search of this gridded desert area. They brought 3 canine sniffing dogs with them, and Jesse would take them to the location that Carly's body was, like he said he would. With the help of university police, everyday civilians, border patrol agents, and even the FBI, along with the Las Cruces Police Department, would all help aid in the search. However, Detective Cortez was not done with his mind games. He had one more card to play. They walked Jesse to the police car to take him back to jail because this search didn't aid in anything. Jesse had lied. And Cortez had timed it absolutely perfectly because as Jesse was getting into that police vehicle, another police vehicle had pulled up with Jason inside it to the desert area, and Cortez made sure that these old best friends had seen each other and realized that Detective Cortez was not bluffing at all. They were going down and they could admit it. After seeing Jesse Avalos, Jason immediately began helping police, accusing his friend to be the one to end Carly's life, not him. Claiming now that they were in the desert, he would show them exactly where Carly's body is. But Jason also lied through his teeth. He led them to multiple different areas, but Carly would not be located. So officers were now very frustrated, and they decided these two need to go back to the jail. They're going to continue the search without them. It took a little bit, but one of the rescue teams located Carly's body in a very gruesome discovery not far from the burning site of her belongings. It was a civilian search team aided by a rescue horseman who found what was thought to be Carly's body. Cortez, who was leading the search, along with his team, ran to this area to confirm that it was a body of what appears to be a woman at a 5'6" statue. 67 days after the initial report of Carly Martinez's disappearance, on March 22nd, 1998, the body of Carly Martinez had been found. The missing college freshman had been located, but the thing with the desert is it is harsh. The elements are hard. The sun is bright. There's very little shade. It's drying out there. There's a bunch of animals, and Carly's body had been left out there for 2 months. It had badly decomposed her body at a faster rate than normal. And what horrified detectives even more is that Carly was found only wearing a single sock and her bra was pushed up towards her neck. The rest of her clothing was found in that pile of burned belongings. Her body was then transported for an autopsy to find any sort of forensic evidence that may have been left behind. Detectives were hoping that they would be able to learn how she passed in order to get the conviction for her killers. At the coroner's office, they did confirm that it was Carly's body using her dental records. However, that wasn't the only sad thing they would learn. The assessment revealed that Carly had been sexually assaulted. There were several signs of her assault, along with 27 separate knife wounds, meaning Carly had suffered a very horrible death and immense pain before her passing. There were multiple stab wounds all over her body, and her chest and head had the most stab wounds. There was also a sign of blunt force trauma to the head. A skeletal biologist and forensic anthropologist was asked to come in to examine the wounds on Carly's body to try and determine the type of weapon that was most likely used. This doctor determined that Carly's decomposition had been sped up due to her being in the hot sun for 67 days. The outer wounds on her skin could not give a conclusion or any sort of indication as to what happened in those areas to cause the wounds. They didn't know if some of these were from being out there, wildlife sort of thing. But they did notice on Carly's hands she had several wounds consistent with being defense wounds, most likely from scratching up her attacker, and the side of the truck fighting for her life. Under her fingernails, DNA was collected and it matched Jason DeSoner's DNA. So Carly did not go down without a fight. And she was most likely responsible for that cut on his hand, like Detective Cortez theorized. This biologist, anthropologist decided it was time to x-ray the body to see if they could learn more about any of these injuries were inflicted post-mortem or before, and also so they could kind of pin down the sort of weapon that was used. The x-rays revealed a very horrifying detail. There was a tiny piece of metal knife located in Carly's skull. There was also a second pattern of trauma consistent with another type of object, leaving a clear impression that this second weapon was not a knife. The doctor gave an educated guess that this object was some sort of needle nose pliers. Detectives believed that this made sense. There were the knife and the pliers, 2 weapons for 2 killers, 1 for each person. The pliers were a very odd choice of weapon, and one that wouldn't necessarily need to be used if you had a knife already. Why would there need to be pliers also? With all this evidence in front of them, police began to reconstruct how they believed the evening evening of the 14th went. They believe that after roller skating and drinking at the bar, Desnoyers and Avalos took Carly out to the desert to continue their drinking, and that is when they assaulted her. The truck had this middle seat, like I said, it was 3 seats across, like 1 row, 3 seats, and the blood had been found in the middle seat. So they theorized that 18-year-old Carly Martinez was sitting in the middle of these 2 men, boxing her in so that she couldn't get out of the car on her own. And these men figured that they were in this some sort of power and control of her because she was boxed in between them. And in their twisted mind, they could just take advantage of this young college student. So they raped her. But in the detectives' theory, they believe that Desnoyers and Avalos realized that what they had did was wrong and they couldn't just drop Carly back off in the city without getting in trouble with the law. So they decided to end her life, disposing of her body in a remote location, hoping that the desert was so vast that she would never be found. Then these 2 friends burned her belongings to hide evidence, but they forgot about the jacket. They went back and they cleaned the car. They cleaned themselves off, but they didn't clean their apartments that well. Carly was just 18 years old, barely in her 2nd semester of college, and not even a full year of being away from home, living on her own. This sort of thing could have happened to anyone. Carly was on a date, which is something college students do all the time. She did nothing wrong. She had her whole life ahead of her, and because these 2 sick, twisted men decided they could take it away. The trial began soon after all this evidence was collected. Jesse Avalos was convicted first on charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, and criminal sexual penetration. He was sentenced to life in prison plus more. So he was given life in prison plus more time on top of that for every single charge, but he's gonna die in there. Jason Desnoyers' trial was next, and he was convicted on the charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, criminal sexual penetration, 5 counts of tampering with evidence, 3 counts of conspiracy to commit tampering with evidence, and also he was given a life sentence plus more, meaning got a life sentence plus more years for different charges, so he's gonna die in there. On September 24th, 2002, Desnoyers actually appealed his ruling in front of the state of New Mexico Supreme Court, claiming that since he had actually had 2 trials, his first trial ended in aired evidence and discovery ruling, meaning that the evidence that was in the case wasn't logged properly, so it ended in a mistrial. He claimed that he was retried for the same crime, which caused double jeopardy, so his rights were violated. Which double jeopardy, if you don't know, in the States, it basically means that you cannot be tried twice for the same crimes. However, his first trial ended in mistrial. It never went to jury. There was an error in just people logging the evidence, so it wasn't really double jeopardy. The Supreme Court ruled that his life sentence was fair and upheld his charges of life in prison, where both Jason and Jesse Avalos hopefully will die a very painful death. Carly was laid to rest in an El Paso cemetery, and her death brought the whole community together. On the 10th anniversary of her death on January 15, 2008, the Martinez family spoke to a local news station about her passing. The family took their sadness and grief and turned it into anger and turned it into action by enacting change, by creating a mosaic in honor of Carly's life that would always be at Marwood Park, a park in the city, which for the first 10 years held the annual Carly Martinez Race for Awareness, which helped support victims of sexual assault. The race ended in 2008, 10 years after it began. The family decided it was time to move on. They really loved raising those funds for 10 years, but they knew their healing process needed to go in a different direction. Over 20 years later, the Martinez family welcomes any and all thoughts of Carly that are positive. They continue to support victims of sexual violence and hope Carly's memory can be that of one who supports fellow victims of sexual assault. Carly would have turned 45 years old this year. Who's to say what amazing things she would have done in her life, what career she would have gotten into, if she would have moved to different parts of the city, maybe different parts of the world. Would she have gotten married? Would she have kids and started a family of her own? There's endless possibilities. But her life was taken away from her at such a young age. And hopefully we can all remember Carly Martinez for her family's efforts to help sexual violence victims. That is all the information I have on this case. I apologize if the lighting changed a little bit. My camera overheated. It's 110 degrees in Texas. So I just want to do a couple of thoughts. This case is really, really hard because it could have happened to anyone. It's just so hard to talk about cases like this where one, the victim is so young. It just reminds you how evil of human beings are out there. Luckily, these two are in jail for the rest of their lives. They will never be able to harm anyone else. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this case down below. As always, as a little bit of a palate cleanser, the doggo picture of the day is this picture of Clover, who is right here. He loves the pillows. Him and Nova love a good nap. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want. Turn on that bell notification. And that is all I have for you today. Love you, mean it, kisses. Don't think stupid, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye!